Okay. Marty, are you ready?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Well, welcome to the SBDC crowdfunding program today, presented by Martin Butts of Small Potatoes. We're going to do, it's a video webinar, and during the program, there's going to be time for questions. And so if you have something, just let us know. And Marty, you'll be feel free to take questions, correct?
That's correct. Yep. At the end of every little section, I usually like to stop and get some questions, so that way we're answering them in real time. And it'll just be easier if we just wait till I give you a little heads up. And then if you ask Scott, he can repeat it back to me so I can make sure to hear it clearly. All right. So to get started, we'll do I just want to get a sense of where everybody is, how much you know about crowdfunding already, if you have some experience with it. So to begin, how many folks here have actually contributed to crowdfunding campaigns, Kickstarters? And you can just do show of hands, just put your hands up. Okay, so nobody has contributed to a campaign in the past. Have any of you run a campaign of your own already? You've tried once before. Perfect. And of you guys that are there, how many folks you have an idea that you're looking to fund right now? So you know what it is that you want to try and get money for. Okay, looks like that's where most folks are at. And then how many folks they like the idea of crowdfunding, they'd like to know a little bit more so when the idea comes? All right. So quickly, just so I have, we've got a small group so we can really try and customize this to the kind of stuff you've done. Would you mind just shouting out what is it that you are trying to fund in the short version? So if you're a farmer, say a farm expansion, starting a new restaurant, what kind of stuff are you guys looking to raise money for?
We're going to be opening up a small brewery.
Opening up a small brewery.
Microloan funding for Africa.
I missed that.
Microloan funding in Africa.
Okay, awesome. And you?
I'm not trying to raise money for anything. I'm an attorney, so I'm just trying to find out more about crowdfunding and how it works and any
Great.
cases for people.
Okay. And then we'll go over a little better of what crowdfunding is, but is there anybody who specifically came because they want to know a lot about equity crowdfunding? Okay. We're going to cover equity a little bit, but not a lot. And we'll get into the reasons why as we go through, but we'll cover equity early. And then we're going to get more into what is typically called perk-based, what I like to call community crowdfunding. So let's jump in, and we'll start with just the basics. All right. So in the simplest sense, crowdfunding is a way for often entrepreneurs, but really entrepreneurs, artists, community members, to raise money for projects through small contributions from family, friends, and strangers. What you usually do is you pick an accredited platform, and we're going to cover a lot of different platforms where people can go to a website where you've set up your campaign, and then they can make contributions that are small or large depending on what it is that you're looking to raise. And with the contribution-based, the perk-based, they're going to get some small item back one time, and you don't give up any part of your business. The difference with an equity crowdfund is where you're actually going to give up a little stake in the business. So folks are typically using it to raise for a launch or an expansion. The most important thing is that you're not getting a loan. This isn't money you're going to be paying back. This is money where you're raising capital, and then at the end of the day, with all the rewards based, nothing goes back to the contributors outside of that one-time reward. With an equity based, which is still very new, which is part of the reason we're not going to cover it in great detail today, you're actually selling a part of the company the same way you would when you're selling stock. They're going to get some equity and some payback. For me, the rewards-based ones, for most people, the rewards-based is a better fit just because of the amount of money that they're raising The equity piece is usually for a more sophisticated business, so it's not somebody who's starting, it's somebody who is well developed. And again, we'll get into that in just a minute here. The most important takeaway that I usually have for people is that it doesn't just make money from nowhere. You have to have put together a good network of people to reach out, and it's really about having a plan and a platform in order to raise the money through a network that you have. So one of the biggest mistakes I've seen through the years is people post a campaign online, and then they just leave it. They walk away from it, and they expect that money is just going to come down out of the sky. And it's not like that. This is a full-time project once you take it on. We're going to give you a good set of plans in advance so you can kind of try and minimize the amount of time you need to manage it. But ultimately, I tell people to look at this as a full-time project, you know, at least a heavy part-time project. But you're going to be working your network every day, every few days, depending on how you set it up. Now, the biggest thing for me, I ran a campaign. I have a small food consulting and support business. I work with all kinds of different food companies throughout the food system. It could be restaurants, farmers, small producers, nonprofits. And I ran this campaign to help. In 2011, I ran a campaign. I was working with a client that we had been trying to figure out how to break into New York City. So I'm originally from Syracuse. I'm in Daytona Beach, Florida now. I just moved down here a couple of months ago. And I was working with a company out of Rochester. And we've been trying for almost a year to sell his products in New York City. And it was very difficult. We had a hard time breaking in. The stores didn't want to talk to us. They didn't recognize the brand name, so they didn't make time for us. And we struggled with it. And so I ended up going to a conference, a TED conference in New York City, where one of the speakers was a woman named Elizabeth Yu, and that's the letter U with an umlaut, who was, this was 2011, who was writing a lot about crowdfunding and Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And so her talk, she presented kind of the power of community fundraising using crowdfunding platforms. So that kind of planted the seed for me as, well, if I want to start expanding my business, I don't have great credit. I don't typically need $50,000 to $100,000 to get a loan. Banks usually want to loan you more as opposed to less. Then we had another speaker who came up who was a farmer, and she talked about her experience of trying to break into New York City, very similar. And for her, it turned out it was all about the farmers market. So now I had an idea. So over the course of the conference, I got a chance to chat with both of them and flesh out the idea. And so what we decided to do was to launch 4 farmers market booths every weekend in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And that way, rather than going door to door to pitch to stores, we were selling directly to consumers. We were building a little bit of buzz. But I had the idea about 6 weeks before the farmers market season started, and I needed to buy a pretty fair amount of equipment. It was about $3,500, $3,600 worth of stuff: tables, tents, signage, scale, all the little things. And each of them individually were pretty cheap, but I just didn't have the income to spare to get us started. So I launched an Indiegogo campaign. At the time, the largest campaign that had ever raised was about $50,000. And now about the largest is a little over $13 million. So in the last 3 years, crowdfunding has really taken off. And the money that I got, the $3,600, was absolutely vital to what I was doing. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without it. But over the course of the campaign, what I really found out was that more than raising capital is it really built a team of ambassadors and supporters and people that were going out into the community and saying, hey, look, here's a guy who's trying to do something different. He's trying to own it himself without selling a piece of the business. We really think that he's doing good work and supporting people. And so I ended up getting so much goodwill and so much, I don't want to say free advertising, but I got, people were spreading the word about what I was doing, and that ended up being as beneficial as actually raising the money. So to give you an example, at the time I launched my campaign, I had 400 Facebook fans, and the day we closed the campaign, we had 800 Facebook fans. So we got about, I think it's 78 people contributed, but we got 400 more people that were actually following what we were doing. So as you go into this, try and keep that part of the campaign in mind as well, is that you aren't just raising money, but you're actually connecting with your customers, you're connecting with potential clients and ambassadors. This has become such an important part of crowdfunding that a lot of big companies are launching campaigns just to reap this benefit. They don't need the money. It waters down the pool. It makes it difficult for the rest of us little guys, but they see the value in the more than money. So try and keep that piece in mind as you go forward. And if you're open to that, you're actually going to tend to do a better job of raising the money as well if you're focused on the other, the community building, the support building. The other piece of it that I found really helpful was a sense of accountability to the people that had contributed to my campaign. So if you're an entrepreneur, you know, the chances are that you are a highly motivated individual. You get up you don't need to go and find the motivation to get yourself going most days. But there are days when you're feeling a little down about it, or, you know, you've been trying to go through a licensing process for 3 months and you just feel like you're getting beat up and you don't know what else to do. So for me, it was that I sprained my ankle the week before the farmers market started. I was on my feet 14 hours a day every Saturday and Sunday, and I drove from Syracuse to New York City every weekend in a stick shift with a sprained ankle. So it's been 3 years. My ankle still hurts. It was definitely a grind. 3 months into it, every weekend away from my girlfriend and my dog. There were days where, you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, Monday, and I'm driving back, and I just didn't think I could do it anymore. And I started to think about the 78 people that contributed to my business, that worked hard to make sure that I had the opportunity. And so the days that I needed to dig a little deeper, this was really something that helped push me harder than I thought I could. Now, we're not going to spend this whole time talking about the touchy-feely stuff, but I think it's a really important part of the campaign. So as you go into this, you know, try to be open to the other stuff. Try to make connections with your community, with the people that are supporting your project, and you're going to get a lot more out of the campaign. So even if you don't get to your monetary goal, you can still reap a lot of benefit out of running a good, strong campaign. So as a general overview, to let you guys know where crowdfunding is, what part of the economy it is, last year, $10 billion was contributed to campaigns, which is nearly double from the year before, which was nearly double from the year before that. So this crowdfunding has, well, $10 billion may be a small piece of the economy. I think to everybody in the room and on this call, that is a huge amount of money. And it's really shifted it into the pockets of smaller companies, startups, folks like us. So that's been a really exciting piece of it, and it also shows that this trend isn't going away. If you launch a campaign tomorrow, you don't have to worry about, oh, crowdfunding's over, it collapsed. Of the $10 billion, this is one of the metrics that I've really been impressed with. It's turned into $65 billion in economic impact globally and created about 270,000 jobs. I think that this is really powerful. It's a way for folks to do it themselves, with the help, of community and family and things like that, as opposed to big banks and giving up a piece of the action. And as I mentioned earlier, the biggest raise ever is $13 million, but 2/3 of all campaigns are raising $10,000 or less. $10,000 is a pretty good-sized number. Depending on your personal network, how many folks you're going to be reaching out to, that number can go up or down. 25,000 is really stretching the edges of what's possible, depending, again, on your network. So I try to keep track of people that take this session and how much they're able to raise. And from what I can gather, the average raise is somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 or $7,000. I saw one farm raise $90,000. But theirs was a very unique circumstance. They've been in business in the one entity that they were for 5 or 6 years, and then one of the farms that they worked with had been around for 30 years, and they had a barn burned down. And so they had this really well-developed marketplace, and so they were reaching out to a very large group of people with I don't want to say desperate story, but they could really see the needs. Like, they could see, your farm burning down is a big thing. So most of you guys should be thinking of the smaller amounts, the $10,000 or less. And I'm going to jump out of the screen so I can take a peek at you guys. For the folks that have an idea of what they're going to raise, are you thinking of a number bigger or smaller than $10,000? So bigger than $10,000, throw your hand up. And what amount for you folks are you looking for that are going over 10?
I'm looking for about 100,000.
Scott, could you repeat that a little closer to the mic?
100,000.
100,000. All right. That is a giant number through a crowdfunding campaign. There are people that do it, but again, they have a really well-developed network. So I would say the focus for you as we go through this is going to be about the network building, because you really, most people are connecting to their existing network and much less so to strangers' networks. Now you can, and campaigns go viral all the time, but your focus is going to be about building as big a network in advance. And so we'll go through and we'll look at different metrics of what we can do. But 100,000, it might be too big a number. Now I'd never tell anybody they can't, obviously, and people definitely do this. But to look at the percentages and the metrics, you're talking about a 1% of all the successful crowdfunding raises that are out there, maybe less than that. I mean, we might be talking about 0.5% of the successful campaigns. So that's a big number. And then I think I saw another hand in the back. How much money were you looking for?
About 30,000.
Scott, could you repeat? 50?
Over 30.
30,000.
30,000. Okay. Again, still a big number, and we're still in the small percentages, but depending on what it is you're raising for, not undoable. After we go through kind of the how to do it, we're going to look at some actual campaigns. And so we'll look at campaigns that have raised 25, 30,000. We'll look at some big number campaigns. And then I don't know that I have one that's in the neighborhood of 100, but I'll make sure that in the follow-up email, I send you an example of a campaign of roughly $100,000 size to give you an example of what works and what doesn't, how they did it. $100,000 raise. The other thing would be you're going to need a big team. And we're going to go over team building, so that'll be another place that you really want to focus. All right. So now we're going to jump a little into equity crowdfunding. Now, I do want to say I don't work in finance, and equity crowdfunding, you work with accredited investors, and it tends to be an investment-focused piece. This is where you actually do give up a piece of the business. And there's a really high portion of risk for your investors. Lots of crowdfunding campaigns fail. About half of them fail. And so for the investors, it's very new. They just rolled out the regulations for it in the last year, and it's still a little bit of a gray area. So that's part of the reason that we're not going to cover it really in depth. Because it's still kind of being shaped, but also because I'm not a financial expert, and this is for folks that are looking at investment the same way you would be investing in the stock market or anything like that. But the most important takeaway is that it's only approved for accredited investors. So if you wanted to sell equity through equity crowdfunding to your neighbor or to me or to kind of the average person that you might know, they may not be accredited already to invest, and then they wouldn't be able to use equity. So that's been one of the not complaints about it, but one of the critiques of it is they're trying to balance safety of the investors and safety of the companies, so they want to use accredited investors, but it takes away some of the spirit of crowdfunding where, people can raise money from anybody within their network, their family and friends. So equity crowdfunding still only reaches accredited investors and is still a small portion of the population that can invest. So if you are looking to raise more than $50,000, equity crowdfunding can work. It might be a better fit. The raises tend to be much larger through equity crowdfunding than through reward-based, and usually for companies that are already well established. Equity crowdfunding doesn't make much sense for startups unless it's like a tech company or kind of the businesses that are getting invested in that startup anyway. Local scale businesses, it doesn't usually work. It can. I haven't seen it. I've only read about it working that way. In this case, rather than you leveraging your own personal network, the platform that you use, and we'll look at a couple of them here, but the actual website, they're going to bring investors to you. So that's one of the big differences in how the actual function of it is that in this case, you're going to expect those platforms to bring the investors to you, and because of that, they expect you to have a very well-developed business plan, just like any other place that is raising money for investment. They're going to hold you to a high standard. Now, where most of the smaller scale, the startup, the expanding businesses are being successful is they're piggybacking it. They're having a reward-based crowdfunding campaign first, and then down the road launching an equity-based. So they kind of piggyback on it and are able to do a second raise later. Typically, crowdfunding is a one-time deal. Some people are able to make it work a second time because the project is so different that they were so successful. Equity crowdfunding can work better as a second raise, in part because you are reaching out to a different audience than your reward-based. Because again, you're looking at the investors that the platforms are bringing to you. So we're going to look at just a couple of the more popular equity raising campaigns. And so for the fellow who's interested in the equity crowdfunding, I would say, jot these down. This is kind of just a rough overview, but these are kind of the three biggest that I've come across, and this is what most people are using. So fundable, it's just for businesses. If you're raising for a nonprofit, it's not going to work. They're kind of nice because they'll do reward-based and equity-based, so you can run either kind of campaign. So if you wanted to do a rewards-based campaign and then later do an equity-based, you could do it all within the same platform and retain all of the information from your first set of contributors, if that makes sense. So the people that contribute to your rewards-based, and then a year later you'd be able to reach out to them within the same platform for equity-based. And now with most of these, they're going to charge a flat rate every month, and then every time there's a transaction, they're going to charge a little bit. And again, to give you a sense of how big these campaigns are, fundable campaigns are typically, on average, 12 times the size of Kickstarter campaigns. So most people have heard of Kickstarter. It's the most popular platform. That and Indiegogo are the two most popular. So it may not be as popular, there may not be as many campaigns on it, but their average raise is 12 times the size. Another one is Circle Up. They have a focus on sustainable businesses, the new B Corp businesses, food businesses, and they call it circles. So essentially they have a guru in a category. So it might be that I'm a food business person, I work for Circle Up, I help people connect to food businesses. So I have a portfolio offered to folks. There isn't any charge to get started with it, and then you put money into an escrow account so that when you do start making sales, when you're selling equity, they can start drawing the commission off of that. It works. This is very similar to traditional equity raises, just it happens through the website and through the platform. This one is very, very popular with food businesses, breweries. If you guys are looking at an equity raise at some point, Circle Up might be a good fit. And again, there's the website if you want to check in a little deeper on that. And then EquityNet, they're one of the first ones. Again, they charge a flat rate every month. One of the nice things that's different about theirs is they actually offer their own software to go through planning a campaign, which does a lot of business planning and a lot of the metrics that they actually help you build. They have their own software that will help you build the campaign in a fuller way. So that's my quick equity crowdfunding. We're not going to go back to it too much, but did anybody have any questions before we moved on from it? Yes.
just give an example or two of what an accredited investor would be? A name, a company, just who an accredited investor would be.
I'm wondering if Scott might have a little better answer for that. It's a little outside of my world, the financial stuff. So I don't know if you know a little better.
I'm gonna, Martin. I really, I'm not well versed in crowdfunding myself, except I just saw an article on this the other day, and I think an accredited investor means someone with a certain net worth and has the ability to prove that. Where Martin said that, they're not, like, if someone donates to your Kickstarter campaign, they're giving you $100, and if they lose it, or it's not really going to affect their personal financials. But some of these other larger programs where someone may put in $50,000 or $100,000, that might be all that the person has, like their complete means. And so I believe the one called, like, the SEC, when they set up some of the rules regarding individuals making these equity investments, that they have went for the higher, like, net worth individual. So, if for some reason they were to lose their investment, that, they may not be completely wiped out, as opposed to, me investing every penny that I have.
Checking with the SEC would be a good idea. I mean, they keep the list, or
Well, I don't know if they would have a list. I'm sure these websites that Martin's showing us,
Yeah.
The people that are coming through there probably have to be accredited to even do the transaction.
Yes.
Okay.
So accredited investors, accredited isn't like a crowdfunding term. That is for traditional, like if you were going to be investing in businesses through Shearson Brothers or I can't even think of the companies, but the investment firms, the people that are investing through Smith Barney are accredited investors. They've gone through the process, like Scott said, they've met a certain level of net worth, credit levels, and all that. So they've gone through a process to be vetted to become accredited as an investor. So that's not a term that comes from the crowdfunding world. That comes from the finance world, from the investment world, in the traditional sense. So it's the same people that are investing in the equity of businesses in traditional ways. It's the same group of people they're connecting to through the equity crowdfunding.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, and just to jump in one more time, anyone that does have assistance or questions, follow up, you're more than welcome to work with one of the SBDC counselors on a particular campaign, or, provide additional information. And, Martin's follow-up email, he could even, put a little bit extra in regarding the.
And I've got that written, so I've got the question, what's an accredited investor, for the follow-up email. So I'll send a link to an article that'll give a little rundown of it. So when I give this session again next year, and equity crowdfunding has been a little more developed, I'll probably spend a little bit more time. But right now, it's in such a gray area. I could give you information today that a month from now isn't valid anymore, or 6 months from now. And ultimately, for me, personally, the power in crowdfunding is in the community-based, the rewards-based. When it comes to equity crowdfunding and when it gets to be a big thing, there's going to be experts that focus on just that, and I'm not going to be one of them. This, for me, isn't where the value in crowdfunding lies.
Martin, I think we have one more question or comment from our lawyer in that.
Is the SEC the agency that rolled out these regulations that you talked about before, you mentioned before?
Well, I mentioned the SEC.
Well, what you said earlier in the presentation that regulations just recently rolled out. So what agency rolled those regulations out?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but I can find out.
Yeah, I heard SEC from our.
Yeah, that's no problem at all. I always, the stuff I read, it's like the White House rolled out their new crowdfunding plan. I am not that familiar with it, honestly, but I can easily find it, and I can get it to you today. That's no trouble at all.
That's the one that mentioned $200,000 to $300,000 for investment in a certain family.
All right, so that's all we're going to do with the equity stuff again. if you guys have any questions you think of later, my contact information will be on the last screen. You can email me, and I'll be glad to get you pointed in the right direction. But now we're going to move into the rewards-based. So let's get going here. So as of a couple of years ago, there were 450 different platforms that you can build your own platform. We're not going to go over all of them. Crowd Unite is a really great place to go where you can punch in your information. They'll ask you leading questions. You know, what category are you in? Are you a veteran? Did you invent something? And they can get you to a niche platform that will work just with you. So the list you see up on the screen, apps, fashion, technology, there are platforms dedicated to each of these specific categories, as well as many, many others. Most people are using Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and so that's what we're going to focus on. And most platforms work in the same way, and you'll see when we look at a Kickstarter campaign and an Indiegogo campaign, they look very, very similar. So what we go over, the metrics of how to run a campaign, how to build a team, should apply to almost any platform that we look at, but it's definitely worth at least looking into the niche categories if it applies to what you're doing. Again, most people aren't using them. I've worked on 20 or 25 campaigns in some way, shape, or form, and they all used Kickstarter or Indiegogo. They looked at the other ones, and they determined it wasn't a fit, but you should at least take a look, and again, Crowd Unite is the place to go and find that information. So the two that we're going to look at are Kickstarter and Indiegogo. They are very similar, and there's a couple of things that are just a little bit different. So Kickstarter is kind of the first famous one. It's all or nothing. If you don't raise all of the money that you're looking for, you don't get any of it. Whereas with Indiegogo, one of the advantages of it is if you only got to a portion of your raise, halfway there, 2/3 of the way there, you can still keep that money. You're just going to pay a higher fee to Indiegogo. So the fees are somewhere between 3 and 12%. I know that's not very specific, but it depends on if you raise everything, how people pay, if they use PayPal or a credit card. So with Indiegogo, if you get to your goal, you get an extra 5%. And they also make some of the money available up front. So if somebody pays you on an Indiegogo campaign using PayPal, the money becomes available as soon as it clears PayPal. So you could be running the campaign and already have the money. And then if you get to your goal, so they'll charge you the bigger fee when they give you the money right away. And then if you get to the goal, they give you a refund check or a bonus check at the end. So Kickstarter, all or nothing, leave money on the table. You don't get the money till the end. Indiegogo, you can get the money, and you can get the money in advance if they use PayPal. One of the advantages to an all-or-nothing campaign is it motivates people to give. If with Indiegogo, people might sit around and not pay till the end. With Kickstarter, it tends to have a little more momentum. People want to give quickly and maybe give a little bit more because they know if you don't get there, you don't get any of it. But, of course, you run the risk of not getting anything at all. So I would say it's pretty evenly split, the number of campaigns I've worked on, one or the other. The other thing with Kickstarter is you actually have to apply. So they're going to put you through they have certain standards that they hold you to. So it used to be they didn't do businesses at all. So if you were a business, you had to go to Indiegogo. Kickstarter didn't want to talk to you. It was for movies and art and music. They've opened it up to include all of these other categories now, but they still make you go through the process. So as an example, I worked with a farm that was buying a third plot in Cortland. So they were going to start growing food in downtown Cortland, and they run a community-supported agriculture program. You buy a share of produce in advance of the season. You get a box of produce every week, and they had part of what they do is they would actually do CSAs that they would either give away to low-income families or were subsidized. So Kickstarter said that because they were giving away some of the product, they actually were a charity, and that they don't, and Kickstarter doesn't raise money for charity. So they actually had to drop some of the language out of their pitch. That was maybe some of the most powerful stuff that they were doing, and it was really going to reach a lot of people, but they wanted to do Kickstarter because for them, if they didn't get all of the money, it didn't matter. It wasn't going to work unless they got all of it. So Kickstarter, it's a little more cumbersome. It takes a little more time because you have to go and apply. Now, with Indiegogo, you could open a campaign right now while we're sitting here and start raising money. An example of the kind of campaign that can end up on there is that people have to sort through is, I was on there one day, and so I travel all over the country and I give these sessions. And so before I go to a town, I try to look up what campaigns are running already. So if I go to Houston, I'll look up all the Indiegogo campaigns in Houston, all the Indiegogo campaigns in Kickstarter. And so I was doing this one day, and I was on the Indiegogo site, and there was a woman who had an enhancement surgery and then had some children, and she wanted to get a tune-up. So she was running a campaign to pay for her plastic surgery. So on Indiegogo, literally anything goes. I mean, people are posting crazy stuff. So it can be more difficult to find, like for strangers to find your campaign because they have to sift through so much stuff. But anybody can post anything, which means you could launch tomorrow. So it's, there's benefits to both. But the Indiegogo, it's just a little more wide open. So for the folks that were looking, do you guys have any questions about the differences between the two campaigns or the two platforms? I'll send you, we'll look at some specific ones on both platforms, and I'll also send an article that gives a little more thorough rundown of each. The fees are about the same, and there's just kind of little differences. Any questions? Great. Let's move on to the next one. So a big piece, as I mentioned before, is in advance you want to build your network. Now, I mentioned how when I ran my campaign, I doubled the number of Facebook followers that I had, which was awesome. It was really great. Chances are I wouldn't have gotten to my goal had I not gotten those extra followers. But that was 3 years ago, and Facebook has changed the way people see business posts. So if you're using your business's Facebook page as opposed to your own personal Facebook page, it's much more difficult to get people to see the content. So you want to get as many people into your network in advance. So I've got the logos up here of kind of the big ones that most people are using. There's tons of new social media out there. The key is not to do all of them, but to do the ones that you are good at. So start the F, I think everybody recognizes, is Facebook. That's been the big one in years past. That's what was my main platform. That's where I got most of my action. If you are running it off of your personal page, you can still get everybody to see whatever you post. So if you're doing your marketing and your outreach through your personal Facebook, Facebook can be really good. For the business stuff, it's not as good as it used to be. Twitter, it's very short. It works for some people. If you're not already using Twitter and getting a lot of action on it, I wouldn't say start a Twitter just for this. Because again, you have to have built in a platform or built in an audience already. LinkedIn, I've seen people do pretty well raising on LinkedIn. I'm not a big LinkedIn user, but for those of you guys who don't use it, it's a professional version of Facebook, just making business connections. The little T there is Tumblr. It's a micro-blogging service, so people can post small like blog entries or photos. A great example of a Tumblr campaign that I saw for Kickstarter was a movie in Syracuse called King Lee, and it was a fictionalized version of the mayor of Syracuse in the 70s. So he did all kinds of crazy stuff. He was involved in gun running and prostitution and drugs, and he was going to Panama and selling guns. I mean, just crazy stuff that people wouldn't believe. So what they did is they ran a Tumblr page where they would post pictures of the old newspaper articles, And so they just used it to show these old newspaper articles. And that Tumblr got a lot of good action for them. Instagram is probably the biggest, the fastest growing social media that's already reached a large audience for 2015. It's just a picture sharing service. If you have a smartphone, I would highly recommend using Instagram for your raise. And post pictures of yourself, the building, the project, anything that's related to it. People seem to respond really well to Instagram. Google Plus, it doesn't. A lot of people are on it, but very few people are using it well. I always put it up here because it's Google, and somebody is going to figure out how to do it right because they do so many things right. So if you have a great Google Plus idea, let me know, and we'll work it into the next session. The W there is WordPress. It's essentially a blogging service. I used Blogspot or Blogger for mine. Blogging was a good outreach for me because I like to write, and so it worked with my strengths. So for me, my blogging was almost daily. So what I did is I wrote 30 blog entries over the course of a week, and then I set up through Hootsuite where it would just launch a blog post every day, and then it would post to my social media. And I made them really simple. I didn't write my life story every time. I said, these are my 5 favorite local food projects. And I connected to these 5 projects that had nothing to do with me, but I was just trying to promote them, and it connected them to my campaign, and they in turn did a little promotion for me, because they said, hey, look, this guy likes what we're doing. Here's a little rundown of what we do. We're keeping great company, and spread the word. My 5 favorite moments in my business's history, the day I started, the day I got my first 4-digit check, those kinds of things. And so I shared that information. So they were short and sweet, and then once a week I wrote maybe 250 words to 500 words, something a little bit larger. And again, that was something that worked for me because I was good at it. Or I was prone to do it. I was going to make a lot of that kind of stuff, whether I was good at it or not. YouTube, we're all familiar with YouTube. You can set up your own YouTube channel and post videos to it. So if you like making videos, you're good with your smartphone, this can be a really, really effective tool, especially if you're building something. So if you can show building in action, or if you have if you're brewing and you're doing some home brewing and you can make some videos and share how passionate you are about what you're doing, show how you're an expert, YouTube's a great tool for that. We did some YouTube videos. So my Small Potatoes, my business, happens behind the scenes of other people's businesses. So I support companies like Better Brittle, Recess Coffee, Flower City Pasta, whatever it may be, and you don't necessarily see my brand. So it was kind of hard to get people to understand what it was that we were doing behind the scenes because they didn't see our success. They saw the success of other people. So we started a little campaign. I went up to all the companies that I worked with, and I just said, hey, tell the camera what it is Small Potatoes did for you, and then say, I am Small Potatoes. So the woman who owns Better Brittle said, I'm Christiana Samavia. I started working with Small Potatoes, and I had 5 accounts. Now I have 80. I am Small Potatoes. And they were quick, fast. They could go viral. So again, if you're good with video, YouTube is a good one. And then Foursquare is for folks that already have a physical location. It's a check-in service. Somebody comes into your business, they check in that they're there, and you can engage them. People that come in the most win little prizes. You can offer discounts. And so what I feel is if you're using Foursquare, make sure it says on there when people check in, it alerts them to the fact that you are running a campaign. So again, don't use all of these. Pick the ones that work for you and then tell your story through those platforms. What a lot of folks will do is they'll use the last 8 or however many are up there and post them to Facebook. So Facebook kind of catches everything. They post to Instagram, then they share to Facebook. They post to Twitter, then they share that to Facebook as well. Kind of expand the reach of it. But the main thing is do what you can manage. If you can only manage 1 social media, 2 social media, well, only do those 2. Don't start doing something you're not familiar with. Get to know it before you start launching the campaign and using it as part of that. And again, use what you are good at. If you're good on camera, use YouTube. If you're good taking pictures, use Instagram. You're good at writing, use a blogging post. Do you guys have any questions about the social media? Do you have one that you're interested in, you think might work for you, you want to know a little bit more about it? All right. Team building. This is another place where I've seen people make mistakes, is that they try to do the whole thing themselves. So there is a tremendous amount of information out there. Because everything is happening online, the platforms and other folks have done a really good job of looking at what works and what doesn't and building statistics for it. So one of the statistics that I've always come back to, and hasn't changed over the last 3 years, is successful campaigns typically have 4 team members. Now, if you don't have 4 people that can work on it, that's okay. You can get by with less. If you're raising $100,000, you might want 8 or 10 team members. So my team was 4 people total, myself included. I had someone who handled all of the perk distribution. So we had 78 people contribute. 78 people needed to get their perk at the end. Some of them were in California and Oregon. Some of them were local. I had somebody that it was, and one of our perks was T-shirts. So they had to pick a size and a color. There was a lot of, I made it a little more complicated than I would if I was doing it now, but it meant that I needed somebody dedicated just to engaging all of those people, getting their T-shirt size, and making sure it got to them. So I had somebody that was their piece. I had somebody that wrote some copy for me. She wrote my press release. She sent it out to her network and wrote a little bit. She wrote a couple blog entries. I had my 4th guy was kind of a catch-all. He was part of my team, so when I expanded into New York, he was actually my operations manager for New York City because he lived there, so he helped us get a lot of the things that we needed. So as we got some of our funds, he would make a video that was like, hey, this is the update where I'm in New York. This is what steps we've taken. He didn't have a really committed specific role, which I usually recommend, but he helped with a lot of different things. So these are some of the things that you might want to get support. Either you're not really good at it or you don't have the time for it. Video production is one that a lot of people will do. They know somebody who's good with the camera, who knows how to edit, and they have them make the video for them. We're going to talk about video production, but I won't get into it too deep, but having somebody to produce your video or videos is really good. Fulfillment, that's the perk fulfillment, as I mentioned before. If you are not really strong at social media, having somebody that's a social media manager can be really helpful. Somebody that makes sure that there's a post every single day or 3 times a day, that the content is always fresh, that they're just not repeating posts, but actually putting up new, fresh content all the time. Copywriting, I put that on there because some people don't like to write or they're uncomfortable writing about themselves or their own project. That's a role that I've played on a number of campaigns, is actually write the pitch. Or I might write the video dialogue or something like that. If it's a large pitch, if it's a large raise, you might want to have somebody in charge of banking, like a treasurer, graphic design, or the design of I don't know what else it might be, but like I had somebody design my T-shirts. That was one of my perks. So that might be someplace that you're able to get a team member. And then promotion, I'm thinking more that somebody who's doing outreach. So not so much social media, but somebody who's actually doing more on-the-ground stuff. Maybe it's reaching out to local media, press release, some stuff like that. Are there any places that you guys think you might be weak in the parts of the campaign that we've talked about that you want to talk about team building? Or is there some great idea you have of a role that somebody might take?
You should add an attorney.
Yeah.
You should add an attorney to that list of your team. Add an attorney to the list.
Martin, he said add an attorney.
Add an attorney. You got it. Yeah, I'll do that right now. That's a good one.
Hey, I'm gonna come up and ask you.
But I would, no, that is, oh yeah, go ahead.
On the banking end of it, do you know of any software that will help you track, let's say you want to have a people-powered product, and you want to have a way to reward people who have helped with your project throughout the whole situation. Do you know of anybody that has any expertise in that, or maybe it's something we need to follow up on later after the deal?
Actually, Indiegogo has that built into the platform.
Okay.
So we'll look at an Indiegogo profile. If that's something you really want to do, and I think you should, I think that's a really smart way to do it, Indiegogo will actually let you know who specifically sent somebody to your campaign. So we'll look at that, and Indiegogo might be a good fit for you if that's something you're looking for, and I think you should. I think that's a really, really good way to do it.
Well, that's the screen. Sorry, I was just thinking, seeing the banking end of the situation, I wondered about that. Okay, thank you.
Oh, so yeah, so they actually, and like I said, we'll look at it, but it'll tell you who sent, not only how many people they sent, but how much money that they've raised. And they all have built into the platforms pretty good ability to track the money itself. You should be able to get that within a platform if that's something that you want without having to do something separate. And I actually want to go back to the idea of having an attorney on the team. I think that that's really valuable for a number of reasons, but especially if you're an inventor or you're having something that you know, one of the risks of crowdfunding, depending on what your project is if you've invented something or you've come out with a game or software, you're putting it out into the world oftentimes before it exists. So you need to protect yourself. You want to make sure that you've got it trademarked or copyrighted or whatever it is that you need to do. So if you have something you think somebody could steal, you better get to an attorney before you put one word of it up online. Now, if you're opening a brewery, obviously nobody's going to swoop in and steal the brewery away. But if you have some, very secret recipe because you have the beer nobody else is making, the quadruple IPA or some such thing, then you might want to go and just make sure that you've protected yourself. That is a very important piece. And as crowdfunding has gotten bigger, it's gotten to be more of an issue. So for those of you folks that need it, I don't know this fellow's name, but make sure you grab him after the event.
I'll go.
All right. So moving on. Let's get up. All right. So telling your story. This is a picture of me telling a story. I don't know. I work with a woman on occasion who assists me at some of my events, and she has the ability to take the worst pictures of me of all time. Rather than fight it, I've decided to embrace it. So the biggest piece, crowdfunding is all about telling people your story. And so you want to make sure that before you launch, you've figured out all the different ways you're going to tell that story, and these are kind of the basics of it. So there's the written pitch, the video pitch, your elevator speech, and then making sure you share it everywhere you are able to. I start with the written pitch because it's easier for me to kind of organize everything, and again, that's where I feel like I'm strong. Explaining the benefits of the campaign. So as you get into the written pitch, there's things that you want to make sure that you do really well. You want to make sure that you've made the need clear to people. Why is it that you're crowdfunding? Why aren't you going to a bank? Why is it that you need this amount of money? Why is it $50,000 or $100,000? Make sure that they understand the need, and so you have to let them know what the problem is that you're solving a little bit. So some of it, I just tell people, is there a problem that you're solving? If you're opening a business, maybe the problem that you're solving is you're trying to open a business without going into a significant amount of debt. That's a very common one. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that they understand that piece very easily without being too negative. People respond to the more positive pieces of it, and so just make sure that you kind of balance the two. Also, less is more. The good campaigns, again, when we look back at the metrics, are 500 words on their campaign page, which is really short. But what I tell people is don't try and write 500 words when you get started. When you're sitting down with your pen and paper or your keyboard, write 10,000 words. Write everything that you could possibly say about your campaign and your business, and then edit it back. So you write everything. You call, let's say you cut 80% of that out or even 50% of it. You keep that 50% that you've produced, and so now over the course of the campaign, you tell those other pieces of the story. So when people land on a page, they kind of want to get a sense of it. They don't need to become experts in your business or your project or whatever it is. Some people might want to be, though. So you make the landing place clean and clear. Less is absolutely more. Now, this isn't the perfect example, but it's an example I still like to use. I used to work in a grocery store, a little community-owned food co-op, and we sold supplements, which a lot of those old natural food stores do. And they measure grocery stores in feet. So there's a 4-foot section, and that's how you gauge it. We have 8 feet of potato chips. We had 24 feet of supplements in a store that was only 4 aisles wide. So 24 feet, we were dedicating a ton of space to selling supplements. When I started working there, I cut the 24 feet down to 8 feet. Everybody told me I was crazy. We were going to lose money, lose money, lose money. We actually saw an increase in sales of 40%. People may tell you they want to know everything, but really they want to make easier decisions. So less is more. Like I said, so we might have had 8 different kinds of vitamin C. We cut it down to 1. We sold more vitamin C by having just 1. So make it easy for people. Edit it down to just the studs, just what you need them to know. And then over the course of the campaign, use your different social media platforms to tell a different piece of the story. So like in my campaign, I didn't necessarily get into what every single company I worked with did or every single service I provided, but then I might write a blog about some of the other services I provided that weren't necessarily the main part of the campaign. So write it all, edit it back, make it really easy for people to understand what it is that you're doing. Beyond that, make sure that they understand why you're passionate about it. What moves you to do this? What is compelling you to get it done? Make sure that can happen. It doesn't have to happen in every piece, but if it's not in the video, make sure it's in the written version. If it's in the written version, maybe it doesn't need to be so much into the video. Also be really clear about why you need the amount of money that you need and what you're going to do to spend that money. So when we look at the different campaigns, on my campaign, I went down to the dollar. I believe my ask was $36.45. It was very specific, and I told people this is how I came up with that number. These are the tools that I'm going to buy. People put campaigns up there, and they'll say, I need $10,000. Well, where did you come up with that number? Why is it that much? So transparency is a very big part of crowdfunding and telling your story. That doesn't mean you can't get to a flat rate number. Most people do. But just make sure that it's really clear as to how you're spending that money. People want to know that you actually need it. And then also, as you're telling your story, make sure that it's really clear to somebody about why they should support you right then. That's one of the tough pieces of crowdfunding is, I think I read on average, it takes 6 visits before people contribute. So you do want to compel them. You don't necessarily have to do the hard sale every time, but you do want to make it clear to them, like, listen, we need to make these moves right now. Momentum is important. Successful campaigns typically raise 30% of their money in the first week. If you don't get there, if you raise 1 or 2%, it's very unlikely you're going to get to the end game. And part of it is that people don't see other people supporting it. So one of the things, and we're going to talk about, I call it priming the pump, is getting people to agree to commit to a contribution before you even launch the campaign. So those folks that are like your core group, your mom and your neighbors or your best friend or people that are working on the team, whatever it might be, get them to say, listen, on day one when this thing launches, we need those dollar signs. We need it to get going. And so that's one of the things that will keep the momentum going, and it compels people to contribute when they see other people contributing. So make sure as you're telling the story, it's clear to people why you need the support right away. Now, before I get into the video pitch, I want to see if there's questions about content specifically. So as you're shaping the general pitch, you're doing the written one, do you guys have questions about specifically that piece of the pie there? Either I'm very good at this or I'm very bad at this. Do you guys have everything you need, or
Marty, this is Scott.
All right. So
I'm not sure if this is the right moment, but just is it better to like ask for a little less money and then maybe go over that, or like you said, set your goal? He's calling back in. No. While we're waiting, Bill, what's your question next?
am I back?
Yes.
Am I back?
Yes, you are back.
All right. I went to hit the volume and I hung up on you. Sorry about that. If you can repeat your question, I would be happy to answer it.
Martin, I was asking if it's is it better to maybe ask for a little less than what you're really asking for? Like say you need 10 and you ask for 7.5 just to make sure you get something.
That is a strategy that people have put to work, absolutely. I tend to tell people to ask for what you need and then have other projects in mind in case you go past the goal. They call it stretch goals. So if you need $10,000 to get what you need to have done, have a plan for 15 and have a plan for 20. So you get to 10, you've still got a week left. You send out an email blast and you say, we've gotten so much amazing support because we're winners and everybody wants to be on the winning team that if you help us get to the next level to 15,000, we'll be able to also do this. So definitely have a plan where if you raise more, if you ask for less than you need, so if you need 10 and you put on the campaign, listen, we're willing to settle for 7,500, I think you'll end up raising 7,500. So I would say, be prepared to over-raise and don't under-ask. Value it, give real value. Make sure that people are there. I've seen people be successful, like they were a little nervous, and so they said, you know what, we're gonna ask for 20% less than we really need. But I think ultimately you should ask for what you need, or, and one of the campaigns, this is a good example, I had a campaign that did the opposite. They asked for too much. It was a band, and they wanted to raise money for 3 different things. And rather than launching for one thing, they launched for all 3 at the same time. So the first thing they wanted to raise money for was they had a van that they toured in, and they were converting it to biodiesel. It was a really easy story to tell. One of the musicians owned a restaurant where he was actually going to produce the grease that they used in the van. It was an easy, and they also could say, listen, we drive 160,000 miles a year. This will be the environmental impact. Easy story to tell. They definitely could have gotten to their raise. They also wanted to make a new album. They also wanted to pay for a tour of England. So they asked for everything all at once, and people felt like we heard back from people that they thought it was too much. They didn't feel like they really needed the first one because they were trying to get so many different things. Why did they didn't seem focused. So if anything, I would say have multiple goals and only show people one at a time. All right, so any other questions? We'll jump into video a little bit. We're not going to actually play a video. That is the quickest way to lose an audience, so you'll all be nodding off. So we're just going to, I'm going to send you good videos to take a look at, but we're going to talk about some of the basics. And the very first number one thing is that quality counts. Make sure the sound is good. And I don't mean to say the quality counts like you need to be Martin Scorsese and you're going to win an Oscar for this thing, but they need to be able to see you clearly and hear you clearly. And the camera needs to not be shaking. Get a tripod. Get somebody out there with steadier hands. Now, when you all end up going and looking and watching my video, you'll notice that I didn't realize I had just gotten a new computer, and I am not the most tech-savvy guy, as you may have noticed when I just hung up on you. I didn't know my computer had a camera built in, so I leaned my phone up against a coffee cup with bad lights behind me. So when you see it, you'll see light shooting out of my head and me looking down at my coffee cup, giving it in one shot. It worked for me because that's kind of who I am, and so it was personal. But ultimately, if I could go back in time, I would have somebody hold the camera for me and tell me to turn the light off behind me. Those are really big things. It doesn't have to be. Did I hear a question?
No.
No. Okay. So if you're not good at editing, you can do it all in one shot. It's not quality like it has a bunch of fast cuts or anything, but just make sure that you get a good picture with good sound. Again, less is more. One of my all-time favorite videos for a crowdfunding campaign was actually probably the biggest problem they had with their campaign, and that's because it was 4 minutes long. And so I've showed it at a couple of different workshops where I was in the room, and I could watch the moment where the audience disconnected. So at about 90 seconds, people started shuffling papers and looking around. At about 2 minutes, there was a couple people that were gone. At 3 minutes, we'd lost the entire audience. Nobody was paying attention anymore. So for your pitch video, get to the point. 90 seconds to 2 minutes is all you need. If you want to tell more story on video, make more videos. But make sure that you keep it practical and you keep people's attention. You know, we live in the world of Twitter and Vine and all these really short things. People don't necessarily want to watch 4 minutes of you. In fact, almost nobody does. Nothing personal. You all seem wonderful. But you can't always keep people's attention for it. So make sure you get to the point. Plan it out. For some people, that might mean writing a script. For other people, you may be more comfortable just practicing it, not necessarily writing it, shooting from the hip. This is a place where people often get help. Sometimes colleges have a video program, and the students will, as their class project, take it on. I've seen that happen quite a few times where they get a student to do it. They get a friend to do it who maybe works video. The biggest downfall I've seen to using other people is that you've now got somebody on their own timeline producing it. So, you know, we talked about team building in the past, and it applies to this, and it applies to all of them. I tell people to have a team meeting where maybe it doesn't need to be as formal as job descriptions, but you really lay out for people like, you are working on this. This is your deadline. I have to have it by this time. And, you know, if somebody is making a video for you, maybe your first reaction is to say, oh, they're helping me out. You know, whenever you can get to it, don't treat people like that. Treat people like they are working for it. I tell people, if somebody makes a video for you, that is the same as them giving you money for your campaign. That is a contribution. So treat them like a vendor almost. What's that?
No, I don't think anybody said anything.
Okay.
Okay. So, did I have a question there? Sorry, I'm getting a little.
No.
Okay. So get help. Make sure that they know the deadlines. Hold them to it. And then the other part is nail the ask. Don't be shy. I need this money. Please contribute to my campaign. Be clear about it. You know, don't be shy. That is a big problem for most people, is that they are shy when it comes to their campaign. You know, this is like the professional online version of standing on the corner with a sign and a hat, you know. And those guys aren't shy when I see them out there. Most of them. So it doesn't feel good necessarily to do it, but don't let that slow you down. You've got to make sure that you ask plainly and clearly as part of your video. And so, like I said, what's that?
No, I don't think anybody said anything.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got a little back there. So, does anybody have questions about video or comments about good videos they've seen that they think might work? Great. We'll move on to the next section then. All right. Oh, I'm hearing myself. I just caught it. All right. So after you've produced your story, the most powerful thing is to get other people to tell it. So you want to make content that people enjoy, and you also want to make sure that if somebody shares your campaign, you notice and acknowledge it. If somebody shares your campaign, you should treat them and thank them as if they just gave you cash money. Some people, you know, maybe they don't have the means to contribute to your campaign monetarily, but they can do something else for you, like share it or become a team member or provide a perk. That's a way that somebody can contribute to your campaign. But just make sure that you acknowledge every single one of them. Facebook especially has made it a lot, well, they all do, but Facebook's made it easier lately to search for things, like to search through posts. So if you produce a hashtag, the hashtag on my campaign was I am small potatoes, and so when people shared that campaign, they would use the hashtag, and if I clicked on it, I could see anybody who used that, whether I knew them or not, all in one spot. So make sure you keep track of who's sharing it and acknowledge it and thank them on your page. Hey, thanks to, you know, Joe for sharing the campaign today. We had 2 people contribute, and that's because of you. Thank you. The other way to get people to share is through traditional media. So depending on, every community is a little different. And so some communities, crowdfunding is a big deal. Everybody's doing it. Nobody wants to hear about it anymore. Some, it's totally new. So getting people to talk about crowdfunding will get them to talk about your campaign. So send a press release out to, you know, your local newspapers or anything like that, and include in it, and again, this might be someplace that you have somebody helping you, but include in it, besides about your campaign, about crowdfunding. That $10 billion number tends to get people's attention. Whenever I've gotten media to talk to me about crowdfunding, it's been because so much money is being raised. They didn't care about my campaign. They cared about crowdfunding happening in their community. So I tell people, write a press release, send it out. If you have a blog, I post it on my blog also whenever I do a press release. So even if the newspaper doesn't pick it up, the local news network, whatever it is, at least it still can get out into the world and be shared. So at least send one out at the beginning to announce your campaign, and then a second one at the end of the campaign to tell everybody you got there. When I started my campaign, none of the local media cared. When I finished my campaign and got to the goal, I got some nibbles. So don't give up on them. You know, keep in touch with them. There's lots of good kind of, there's lots of support out there to write a press release. And usually you can call a press release right out of your story stuff. It's not going to be different content. It just might be reordered and reworded a little bit. But there's good stuff online about how to write a press release. And if people are interested, I can find something, send that along too. But I also bet the SBDC has some pretty good support for that as well. The other way that I tried to garner media was to make a perk that the perk itself, the reward that you were giving people, was an interesting story. None of mine got picked up, so I won't use those as examples, but a really great example from a couple years ago was the Arcid telescope. It was a telescope that they were sending up, and if you contributed $25 to their $1 million raise, they would take what they called a space selfie. So once the satellite is up, anybody who gave them $25, you submit a picture to them. They put it out on a little arm in space, and they take a picture of you with the Earth behind you. I believe they sold 9,000 of those. They got a lot of press in general because it was an interesting story, but they got a ton of press just because of the space selfie. Because, you know, for $25, I did one for my niece, I did one for myself, I did one for my mom. Yeah, I ended up giving them $25, and I didn't even really care about the project. It's probably the most I've contributed to any campaign ever. But people want that new Facebook picture of the Earth behind them, you know. So if you can find a perk that is worth telling a story, naming rights is a big one. So it might be that you name part of the brew house. It could be that if you had a scholarship fund, it gets named after a specific person. You know, like the naming the bench at the park, that kind of stuff. That tends to be a pretty good perk for a lot of folks. We did one where I was working with a coffee shop. The coffee shop said, you know, if people wanted to come up with their own drink, we would name it after them and put it on the menu. So nobody ended up buying that one, but for $500, you could come up with your own drink, your own latte, you know, the Marty Butts latte or whatever it is, and come up with your own flavor. So people like doing that stuff. It's personal. You limit the number of them that are available, so you don't sell 100 of them. You only sell one. And sometimes that's a perk that might be able to get people to tell the story. And we're going to talk about perks in a good deal, obviously. So once you've started to, you know, you've built your network, you've built the team, you've started to tell your story, or you started to write your story, you're not actually out in the world telling it yet, you want to make sure that you're doing this stuff in advance. So now that Facebook has changed their metrics, it's more important than ever that you are, before you've even launched, you prime the pump. You reach out to that core group of people, the people that you think might give big. Sometimes if you're trying to get somebody to give big, like maybe you're trying to get somebody to give $1,000, that's not going to happen in one conversation. So you want to start talking to them about it in advance. So let's say $1,000 is a big number. You've got one person in mind or two or three people. They may want to see the campaign build a little steam, and they may also want to be wooed a little bit. So if you come to them and say, listen, I'm going to be launching this campaign. You know, we've got some big raises. I know you're filthy rich. No, you could leave that part out. You know, you've helped me with projects in the past, or you've helped other projects in the community. I think this is a good fit for you. Start talking to them about it because it may take some time to get them to contribute. You know, again, your core group of people, you want to talk to them in advance because, you know, one of the things that will happen is everybody shares your campaign the day it launches. Everybody does it all at once. So you get this big rush right at the beginning, maybe for like 2 or 3 days, and then the support disappears. So if you talk to people in advance and say, listen, this is a 6-week project, it's a 3-week project, whatever the timeline is, you know, I hope you can support me early by contributing and support me through the length of it by promoting it as you go, whatever you're comfortable with. So make sure that the day you launch, you know you've got money that's going to show up right away. An email ask is a really good way to do that too. It's just like an email heads up, hey, this is a project we're working on. I think you could be a key member of promoting it in the community. I wanted to give you a heads up. Keep a lookout. I'll email you again when the thing launches. And do a group email. And make that a more select few. You don't have to hit your entire network. You know, I tell people if you make a list of 200 emails, break it up So you do 50 people in your first ask, 50 people in your second ask, and then like 100 at the end. So it's the, your concentric circles of influence. So the core group in the beginning, the kind of secondary group in the middle, and then you're kind of everybody on your email list at the end. That way you are producing content regularly, you're staying after it, and you're also hitting people specifically and personally. Do all of this stuff in advance, as much as you can. Write everything in advance. Decide how many videos you want to make in advance. Come up with a calendar about when you're going to post things. Do it all ahead of time. It's so much easier to manage your campaign if you've done the work in advance. So if you've got all this stuff done and then you send a press release out and 3 people want to interview you or come to visit you, you'll have the time that you can do that comfortably, and you'll be in the best place to take advantage of it, because here you're going to produce some new content to share, the newspaper article, the news video, whatever it is, and so you don't want to have to try and fit that in. You'll know what your schedule looks like, and you say, okay, well, I know this is a light day, or I can push this one thing. It works here. We'll share it there. So do everything you can ahead of time so that when it comes to actually running the campaign, you're just managing it. You're not building it as you go. And as I've said a million times, activate your network. I mean, that's a really important piece of what you do. You also want to make sure that it's very easy to lose steam. So you want to make sure that over the course of it, you're able to maintain your presence. And so this is another reason. If you're able to manage everything in advance and have an idea of what you're going to do, you're going to have more flexibility to go places and to talk about your campaign. Networking events is a perfect place. Even out at the bar, like on a Friday night, you go out, again, like I hate to keep pointing to the brewery, but it's something I know a little bit. Go to other places that people are drinking beer on a Friday night to shoot the breeze, and people say, hey, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a while. I know you've been working hard. Where are you at? I'm really glad you asked. I'm running a crowdfunding campaign. Find ways that you can get out into the world. One of the things that I did, I lucked out. There was a business plan pitch competition at the We Live New York Summit right after I launched my campaign. So I signed up for the business plan pitch. It was like an elevator pitch. Despite the fact that I already had a business, I wasn't really a fit, but I got to go into a room with 50 people and make the pitch. And so I made my pitch, and they were like, thank you, it doesn't really fit, but you're in consideration. And so they had 4 judges that would get to vote at the end. But they also did, and all 4 didn't vote for me. They weren't interested in what I was talking about. It didn't make sense for them. I got that. I knew in advance that'd be the case. But they also made videos, and so people could vote for their favorite pitch on YouTube by just hitting the like button. So while we didn't win the competition, I rallied my network to go to the site, and we were actually voted fan favorite. So we didn't get money that day, but we got we got a nice little bump because people were trying to support us being at the competition. So find places like that. Speed networking is a really good way to do it. If there's any kind of industry event specific to what it is that you're doing, go to it. Rotary Club, the pancake breakfast, like anywhere where community is gathering and talking about community, go. Be there. I know like that stuff can be a grind, and doing it 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week sometimes can be more than, you're starting a business, you're running a campaign, you're probably working another job as you're doing all of this. Make time to get out into the community and actually pitch it in real time. Now, I haven't mentioned the fellow with the stars all over him. I posted this picture because I figured if this guy was in a room, everybody would know it. And that's what you want. Is when you're there, you want everybody to know that you're there and that you're the star and that you are running one of these campaigns and that they should talk to you. So get out into the world, maintain your presence, post every single day on your social media. If you pick 3 platforms, all 3 platforms should have fresh content on a daily basis. In order to do that, you want to tell different parts of the story over the entire course of the campaign. So that goes back to the idea of write your full story, edit 80%, put it in a pile, and then cherry pick what works. You know, if an article comes out in the news that's relevant to you, tell that piece of your story, share that content as well. But just make sure that you have something fresh over a long period of time. Be open to what's working and what's not. You know, some campaigns do really well. They get a lot of action around pictures of people. So if you're the person but you're working with 6 or 7 other people, make sure everybody gets their picture up on the site or on the social media. Like farmers do really well when they post pictures of food. So make sure that you're sending fresh stuff and that you keep track of what's working. So you're going to plan it all out in advance, but that doesn't mean you have to stick to it. If you plan it all out in advance and you're like, boy, this one thing doesn't work at all, drop it, get rid of it. Focus on the stuff that is working, and allow yourself, and you'll have some ability to do that if you're just pushing a button because everything is produced in advance. That'll provide you a little time to fix stuff if it's not working. If you're writing content every day, you're going to be behind the 8 ball the whole time. So social media really is the biggest piece of this, and most of it happens on there. But as I said, you've got to get out into the world. The storefront piece, if you have friends, like you may not have brick and mortar yet, but you have friends and friendly businesses that do. So a great idea for a storefront was I was working with a coffee roaster. They didn't have a shop of their own. They just roasted and sold to other shops. They got that shop to put little table tents up on all the tables that said, we get our coffee from these guys. They're running this project. Check it out. Again, going to all of the networking events. Just find ways to talk to people in real life as much as possible. Most of the contributions will come through social media, but ultimately you've got to be a real live person to make it work. So I'm gonna start. We've got about 30 minutes left. We're going to talk about perks, and then we're going to get actually into looking into some campaigns. The biggest thing with perks is personalizing them, either to you and your business or to the people that are contributing. So something that's personalized to the people contributing could be a naming rights thing. Something personal to you're brewing beer, you can name a beer after somebody. Personalizing it yourself is really kind of opening yourself up, telling people about your own history, and sharing perks that might be relative to that. So ours, it was kind of hard for our business to make stuff that was personalized because our business was about other businesses. So that one, I had a little trouble with that one myself. But I've seen other ones where there was a fellow who was doing an art project, and he got people to contribute perks that they would personalize. So soap. He worked with a local soap company that was personalized to the project. So he had a limited amount of soap produced with his art project's logo on the front. So you could only get it by contributing to the campaign. It was the only place it was available. And then if you had it, that was, you were a contributor. Probably the thing that worked best on my perks were these small potatoes t-shirts. I'm wearing one right now. It turned out people really liked them. I didn't expect it. It ended up being our best perk, and it had the double effect of people started asking about them. Hey, that's a good shirt. Where'd you get it? Oh, my buddy ran this crowdfunding campaign. So it continued the dialogue about my business and about my campaign even after the campaign had ended. So that can be a really good one. Doing something that doesn't cost you anything is the best one. That was a mistake that I made in my campaign, is I spent a little too much on perks. I understood that the way I looked at my campaign is I was raising money that I was going to have to spend a little money later on to fulfill. One of the best campaigns I saw with the free and creative was a movie, the same movie in Syracuse I was talking about, the Tumbler, where they made the movie about the mayor. They didn't spend more than $2 on any of their perks unless you spent $75. So they gave out a download of a movie poster. It didn't cost them anything. A download of the movie. It didn't really cost them anything. Buttons. A button cost them $0.25. A bumper sticker cost them 50 cents. Finding ways to keep it cheap is going to help you out in the long run. You don't want to spend too much on perks. One of the other things that I recommend to try and keep the costs down is if you have friendly local businesses, people that you've worked with, people that you can turn to, is instead of asking them to contribute money, ask them to contribute a perk. So my coffee company, when I ran my own campaign, they gave me the coffee that I gave away. They gave it to me. That was their contribution to my campaign. Reach out to people in advance and ask them if they can do that. Say, hey, are you able to contribute something? Maybe I can get it at cost instead of retail. Find different ways that you can make it happen. And when we look at some campaigns, we're going to look at some good perks, stuff that works, stuff that doesn't. And then the other big thing is just to make sure that you have something for everybody. A $5 platform, a $10,000 platform. I tell everybody, if you have whatever the value of your campaign is, whether it's $5,000, $10,000, $100,000, $100,000 might be a tough one to fulfill, to find a fulfillment. But get a big perk, a wildest dreams perk. Hey, if you give us $10,000, we'll name the, maybe not 10,000 up, but if you give us $100,000, we'll name the project after you, or we'll work out something, in your name after it. When you get up to those giant numbers like that, people aren't really necessarily looking for a perk of equal value, but they might just be looking for recognition. If somebody's giving $20,000 to a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign, they probably don't care if they get $20,000 back. It's really about the give for them. And so just make it something that, it's essentially zero value. So one that a restaurant I worked with did, they were a restaurant and music venue, and they had a couple of potential contributors in mind that might be able to give the full $25,000 that they were going to raise, and so they were going to name the stage after them. They didn't get to that number, and you don't have to sell every perk or every that you've got out there, but just make sure that it's available for somebody to just close the deal all at once. And again, we're going to look at perks a little more in depth when we start looking at the campaigns in just a couple of minutes here. And then this is a big one. This is a picture of myself and my grandmother when I was a little man. And when I was a little kid, it was Christmas, it was my birthday, it was whatever holiday or whatever I got gifts. I would open up all my Christmas presents on Christmas Day, and then after I cleaned up all my wrapping paper, my grandmother would go and get the phone book and sit me down at the dining room table, and I had to write a note to every single person that got me a present. I did that with my campaign, and I hear more about the thank you notes than I do about the perks. That's a big, big thing for people. So just make sure that you recognize everybody, and not just with the perks that you send. So one of the first campaigns I ever contributed to sent me a perk I didn't really want. I know better now. Now I just check the box that says I don't want the perk, and they can have all the money. But it was a juice and smoothie bar in Portland, Oregon that some friends of mine had started. And they're vegan, and they're kind of edgy. And so they had what they said, milkshakes for terrorists. And I got this T-shirt, and I would never wear it. I don't feel comfortable with it. They were just trying to be like, that's their thing. That's part of who they are, their brand. It's Portland. It's a much different place. But what they also did was rip a piece of paper in half and write a note that said, hey, man, we really appreciate that you contributed to our campaign. Thank you. I still have it. It sits in my desk. I will cherish that more than I will ever cherish that T-shirt that ended up cleaning my desk and stuff. So make sure that you thank people. Take the time to do it on your Facebook page, but also, as you're sending perks out, write them a thank you note. It really will go a long way. People will feel like you've appreciated what they're doing, and make sure you fulfill those perks. Some people don't. I have contributed to a campaign and then not gotten the thing that I requested, and ultimately I don't care if I have it. I just care that they did it. And so it's always, just like that little handwritten note has always stuck with me, them not fulfilling the perks has always stuck with me. And crowdfunding tends to be on the honor system. If you don't fulfill your perks, they're not going to go to Kickstarter. Kickstarter's not going to make you do it. So this really is an honesty-based system, and through the years it has proven to work for the most part, but sometimes people don't, and that is the worst press they could get. So all the goodwill they could have built, they've lost by not fulfilling them. So here's just a couple of metrics. It looks like we've hit most of these already. The pitch, 300 to 500 words. The length of the campaign, 20 to 40 days depending on the platform. 40 days is pretty common. Remember that you have to produce content every day, or you have to share content every day. So if you do a super long campaign, it's going to be a grind, and every single campaign has a dead spot in the middle. You get really good up front, you get really good at the end, and then in the middle you'll go days where nobody's contributing. So limit that. The fewer days the campaign lasts, the more momentum you're going to be able to have. And pick something that you know you can do. Don't try and run 10 miles when you've only ever run 5 miles. So make something that works for you. And then again, the team of 4 people. All right, so we're going to take a look at some campaigns here. Let's see here. The first thing we're going to look at are the profiles. So when you get on to Indiegogo or you get on Kickstarter, you're going to set up your own profile. So this is my profile for my Indiegogo page. This is my profile for campaigns. This is my profile for contributions. So first you'll see this is a picture of me, a short little description. The next section, assuming it jumps over there, is you'll see on the tabs where I've got the arrow here, the campaigns, which is now loading. These are campaigns where I'm actually listed on the campaign as one of the organizers of it. So I've worked on a number of campaigns where I contributed in advance, but these are campaigns that I actually committed to working through the entire length of the campaign. By being listed on this campaign, people were able to contact me. You should have some of your team members listed on here, but depending on how big a team, you may not have them all listed on your campaign. But this is my personal profile. We'll jump over to contributions. I've given cash to 13 campaigns on Indiegogo, so this contributions tab will list all of that. And the amount of money that I gave, you can see I'm kind of cheap. And then so this we were talking a little bit about earlier about the metrics of keeping track of who's done what. So these are all referrals. So these are people that have come to an Indiegogo campaign page because they linked there from either my Facebook or my Twitter. Those were the two that I have attached to the thing. So you'll see they're able to actually keep track of. So Small Potatoes, which was my project, the first one listed here, about $1,000 actually came from me. So about a third, roughly, of the money that was actually people that I sent to the campaign. So the rest of that came from other people's referrals. This big one, this one's really wild. The Rama Free Health Clinic. I actually managed to send more people to their campaign than to my own campaign. So here you'll see they only gave $5 though. So sometimes these numbers. So you were talking about, can you keep track of how much money is given, who sends them? This is a way that people are able to do it. On your page, you'll see who referred people to your campaign and how much money that turned into. And so then if we look at the Kickstarter version, very similar. They put the campaigns you funded on the front. So these are the 6 that I've given money to. And then they do this little pie chart on the side. So I've contributed to 3 food projects, 2 film projects, and an art project. And there's all these other categories. Some people are collectors, and they will try to go through every category and fill their pie up. I'm not that guy. I'm going to contribute to campaigns that I like. These are all people that I knew in advance, except for this beginning farmer project. But all the rest of this is people that were in my professional network that I connected to. And again, this doesn't include campaigns that I've contributed non-monetarily to. But this is the first thing you want to do. Set up a bio and start looking at campaigns. People like to see, like strangers that are into crowdfunding, people that go onto the websites and search for projects that they don't know about to fund, they like to see that you've also funded stuff. So your homework today is to start a profile on one or both of these platforms, Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and then find a campaign that you think is cool and give them a couple bucks. I'm not going to give you a dollar amount, but give somebody $5. Start to build a little bit of that social capital that comes by becoming a crowdfunder. People like to think that, you're not just taking from the system, but you're actually giving to it. So do a little bit to kind of build up your bio. Plus, if you search around on campaigns, you're going to see stuff that works and stuff that doesn't. So here's my campaign page. There's the bad lighting, my fuzzy face. I'm not going to actually play the video. The only thing I managed to learn how to do editing-wise was to have the logo flash in front of it, and it took me 2 hours to do it. I shouldn't have done it. It was way too much time. So $3,649 you'll see over here. That was my end raise, which was just a couple of dollars over what I was looking for. If you look on this top tab here, you'll see updates. Those are messages that you send out through the platform. So they go out to people who've already funded. Some of these updates I have sent after the campaign was long gone. I sent one a couple of months, probably 4 or 5 months ago, to update people about how the business is doing. So I've used this to kind of keep engaged with the 78 funders that you see over here, because these 78 people are people that believed in my business when there was barely anything there, and so I try to keep them in the loop about how things are going. And then the gallery down here is just pictures that we've added, videos that we've added. So this, we added a perk halfway through the campaign. That's a really good strategy to keeping the fresh content coming all the time, is add perks as you go. Sometimes people will contribute twice because they contributed once and then you put out a new perk and they really liked it. So this was somebody who said to me, hey, I'll make you 3 patches with your logo on it if you wanted to give them away. So this was something somebody contributed to us. We sold them for $22. They sold out in 10 minutes. I should have charged more for them, but that was something we added to the image. This fella that you see in the video, I would never have asked him to do this, but he was a stay-at-home dad who was only able to work on the weekends and from home. And so when I hired him, the job was a really good fit for him, and he really had been struggling to find something since he had a baby. And so I would never ask somebody to use their baby as part of a fundraising video, but he just submitted this to me. And the day we posted the video of him bouncing his baby on his knee saying, thank you so much for contributing to this campaign, it means I can have a full-time job that works with my hours and my lifestyle, we did great that day. So again, this is a way to produce content as you go. If you look on the right-hand side here, these are the perks that I offered. And Kickstarter's laid out the same way. They'll just have the perks laid down the side. I did $1. It was too cheap. I should have just done the $6. The $1, only one person did it. And you're limited as to the number of perks that you can post. So it's usually a dozen. Most platforms, it's a dozen. So launch with 8, 6, whatever it might be, and then roll more out as you go so you don't get yourself tied up. So I probably had too many levels right in here. 15, 22, and 25 are probably not far enough apart. So I'd have a little bump up. So 25 and then 30. This $30 one I wasn't going to do in this level, but what ended up happening was people were like, hey, you're going to drive to New York City every weekend? Can I catch a ride? I said, sure, of course. And so I added a perk. Now, you see I only sold 2, but this ended up being something that I did the entire 6 months that I was going down there. It was a flat rate. For $30, I would take you to and from New York City any weekend you wanted. I had room in my car every weekend. And so this came out of me listening to what people were telling me about my campaign. People saw my campaign. and they said, hey, can I get a ride? I said, great, contribute to the campaign. This $40 one is where the T-shirt was. It was my sweet spot. You'll see 29 people booked those, and that was by far the most people that got any single perk. So $40 is not fair value for a T-shirt and a bag of candy or a bag of coffee. So that people understood they weren't getting real value back. You want them to reach a little bit further. Kickstarter really wants you to be, in your perks, to be like dollar for dollar. But Indiegogo, you could charge people $100 for a pack of gum. They offer you a little more flexibility. But again, since Kickstarter makes you go through the process to apply, they're a little more stringent about that stuff. Now, I guessed that I kind of knew who I was reaching out to, and I thought about my friends and what they spend money on and what they might be comfortable giving. My friends like to go to see concerts. They like to drink beer. But those are, kind of the common things. $40 for a night out, $40 to go to a concert. That seemed like the sweet spot for people. I figured $25 I could get people to say yes without thinking about it. But $40, I knew if I got a good perk that people wanted, that was where they were going to contribute. So think about who you're asking and make your most valuable perk for more than it's worth and a little above, or not most valuable dollar-wise, but most valuable to you, the one you think that's going to drive traffic. Make them reach up a little bit for it. So if you know that $100 is going to be comfortable for people, make it $125. Make them reach just a little bit harder, not so hard that it's uncomfortable, but something where they're like, okay, I want to contribute. That's something I can get to. Now, if we get down to the big ticket one, I had a $1,000 one. You'll see nobody bought it, but I did offer at least one big one. So I want to look at some other campaigns. We'll look at this was the juice. Now that's the same size. Let's look at a little bigger one. So this is Fruition Seeds. They're a seed company out of the Rochester area, and they had a pretty big raise. Their ask was $25,000, which I thought was going to be too big. I really did. Not to say I didn't believe in it, but it was a big number. But they got there, and they got there through volume. 541 people contributed to the campaign. So I didn't show you the metrics online, but I know that I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 people view my campaign, and out of the 1,200, 78 contributed. So make sure that you're reaching out to as big a group as possible, and so this will give you an idea. If you want to raise $30,000, you need 540 people, give or take, depending on who your target audience is. But this will give you a rough sense. $100,000, you might need 2,000 people to contribute to get to that number, depending on, again, who the target audience is. But that's a big number. So you want to make sure that your network can support that. So that'll be one of the things I want you guys looking at as you're searching through other people's campaigns. And then again, as we scroll down, there's the About the Project, a little bit of information about why they were getting into this specific category of seeds. They do non-GMO and organic, so they talk about genetically modified organisms and organic food, and biodiversity. They set themselves as an expert there. My biggest recommendation to them was to use less content, but they got there. These are folks that, there's no one-size-fits-all. There's no rule that applies to every single campaign. So while $300 to $500 may be the sweet spot for most campaigns, if we scroll down, you'll see their campaign is really long. There's a ton of stuff on here. Plus, they wrote all kinds of blog entries. This is just a lot of stuff. So I would have thought that would have been a detriment. It worked for them. So anything that you hear here, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So part of the reason they were able to get there is they did get a big backer. And what did they ask for $2,000? Oh, so for $2,000, you not only got seeds, but they would send stuff to 30 other people within your network. So they made it like, I believe they ran this at a gift season. I might be wrong about that. Let's see. But if you can do it around a holiday where people are giving gifts, there's not a date there. But if you can do it around a time that you're able to give gifts, that's a way to sell perks also. So this again was a big number. They did some stuff that was contrary to what works by most metrics, but they raised a big number. This is a campaign. We're not going to spend a lot of time here because I don't think you guys are looking to raise $13 million. But this is one everybody should take a look at. This is the biggest campaign to date. It's called The Coolest. And it was a cooler, but it was cooler. It was the coolest. So it's a cooler with an MP3 player built in, blender. It has all of these great little features to it, and it went viral like crazy. He's got a great video. But you can see here, his goal was $50,000, and he raised $13 million because he had a good, smart campaign. He was in product design. That was his background. So he designed a very good, very smart campaign. And they did, you can see it, $5. People just wanted to take part. They got 1,000 people to give them $5. And here you can see some pictures of the actual the cooler itself. This is all the different media that picked it up. Now they weren't expecting that. Again, they were looking at $50,000. So this ended up being a really big raise, and it was kind of a big deal. Chances are you're not going to go this viral unless you're making something so weird and unique as the coolest. And so one of the other things that they did well was they essentially sold in advance. Seeing what that number was. Here it is. At $185, you actually pre-ordered one of their coolers. And they got 50,000 people to pre-order. So that is something that if you have a product, you should be pre-selling the product on your campaign page. So I've got a few other that we could look at, but we've only got 5 minutes. So I'd like to hear either questions, comments, or if you guys have a specific kind of campaign that you'd like to look at, I can see if I can pull one up real quick. No questions at all. Oh, here we go. All right. Thank you.
Hi, Martin. I just recently started a project. We're about halfway through on Kickstarter. And we're about 55% funded currently right now.
Cool.
And I've been reached out to by several different people on Kickstarter calling themselves basically a networking guru to help boost your program. And I don't know if you've ever had any experience working with any of those folks or what your thoughts were on that.
First of all, before you go, tell me the name of your project so we can all take a look at it.
Sure, it's Dream It, Do It, Western New York. And it's
one more time.
Dream It, Do It, Western New York.
Do it.
Right there. Yep.
The drone video project or create this one right here?
Drone video
all right,
project.
Beautiful. So I have had people ask me. I've had offers from people to run their campaign for them for a fee. I don't do it. I think I haven't. Like there are people out there that call themselves crowdfunding professionals, and they'll take a percentage. I definitely don't think it's worth it. It could be for other people. I think you lose a lot of the value that you get from crowdfunding campaign, the brand building, the connecting with your clients, with your potential customers, by hiring other people to run it. If you're already halfway through the campaign, it lowers the value even more. So there are people that do it. If they're offering services like loss, like making sure that you're trademarked, I think that's something really valuable. If they're telling you that they're going to get people to fund your campaign, I don't buy it as much. I think you're better off doing it yourself and identifying people that you can bring on as team members as a contribution. But I wouldn't personally, and the companies that I've worked with haven't hired people to do it. I think it's kind of against the spirit of crowdfunding, but also you're going to lose value. And I think it also kind of diminishes your campaign in the eyes of some people. So some people might say, well, they're just hiring people to raise money for them. Why should I do this through Kickstarter or this kind of platform? And with the number that you're looking at here, I think you're better off working it hard yourself. And really, especially if you're in good shape to finish. By the way, I'd feel pretty comfortable if I had 19 days to go and $1,200. So that is definitely. I wouldn't do it if I was you, honestly.
Right.
It's kind of like the paying for likes on Facebook. Yes, you get the likes, but are they valuable? Is it people that are actually connecting with your content? I don't think you're going to see a big bump in how much money you raise. I think you're better off trying to get people on your team to do that work for you.
Great, thank you. One more question for you. As far as the budget goes, essentially the basis for our project is we're trying to raise enough money to purchase that drone to be able to use at some of the events that we coordinate for our program. As far as the budget goes, to kind of demonstrate to funders, where their money is going, how detailed would you get putting that on there for people to see what exactly their money is going to support?
On my campaign, I was down to the dollar. I said, this is going to cost me $20. This is going to cost me $50. I would imagine, how much does the drone itself cost? Is that most of your raise?
It's about $1,400, but we're also looking to get, protective case for it, backup batteries, and additional kind of stuff that goes on the piece of equipment.
I would just lay all that stuff out there. It's going to cost us $1,400 for the drone, $500 for the protective case, $200 for this. I would lay it right out there. If there's only like 5 or 6 things, I would add it. And I would also say that since you're at $1,350, since you're at $1,350, when you get to the $1,400 and that's the actual cost of the drone, I'd make a big deal out of that. Like make that like, thank you so much. We've raised enough to buy the drone itself. Now we need to raise the additional money to make sure that we take care of it, that we have the other things that we need that go to it. So you're perfectly positioned. So when you get to your goal, or, don't even wait to get to the goal. When you get done, or do it from your phone, tell people, hey, we're $48 away from the cost of the drone itself. So start that part of the conversation to drive some traffic, and then once you get to that, start talking about the other costs that are associated with it. I think that you could be pretty candid with people, $500 for this, $300 for that, whatever it may be.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. So it's noon now. I'm not in a rush to get anywhere, but I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time. So if folks need to go, please feel free to. Scott, if you've got anything else you need to say to folks about SBDC, you want to give a little wrap, that's all great. And also, if you guys have more questions, you want to talk about it more, I'm not going anywhere. So we can look at another campaign or two, whatever works for the group.
Yeah, I would say if anyone has any questions, this would be the time to ask. And then I do have a survey for everyone before you leave. Other than that, you'd be free to go. And there will be follow-up as long as we have your email address. We should.
Is Martin going to share the PowerPoint at all, or is there notes on there?
We are recording it, so
okay.
So we will have access afterward. We'll give that to everyone.
Mark, do you have any local Western New York breweries doing a Kickstarter right now at all? Do you know them?
I don't know of any that are on Kickstarter right now. But the Kickstarter and Indiegogo are very easy to search by address. They both have a little different metric. See if I can bring one up here. But you can browse your local. You can punch in a zip code. I don't know of any breweries. I will say, and I'm sure you know this, there's breweries coming everywhere in New York right now. So you are in a good position to start having those conversations. I've seen there was a brewery in the North Country that they were raising money. Actually, it wasn't a brewery. It was a farm that had been a dairy farm for 100 years, and the next generation was moving to growing hops. So they didn't want to be dairy farmers anymore because you got to milk cows twice a day, every day for the rest of your life. So they wanted to get into growing hops to kind of catch up with this burgeoning industry. I will send along. There is a brewery campaign. I'm sorry I don't have it preloaded There's a brewery campaign that's not in New York. I forget where it is, but they're running a nice campaign, and I'll send it along to SBDC. So the follow-up email will have a good campaign to look at. And before I disappear, let me get my contact information up here. If you guys have questions, this is all of the Small Potatoes 42 is my social media handle. You can find me anywhere. Marty at imsmallpotatoes.com for direct questions. I'm happy to answer questions that you guys have as you get into your campaign. So if you're thinking about 2 platforms, you find, you go and do some research on equity crowdfunding and you see something that I should know, that I should read, please send it along. All I ask is give me like 2, 3, 4 days to follow up. So if you need something right away, I might not be able to respond quickly, but if you get specific questions, send them along. I'll point you in the direction of stuff. I'm going to send out through the SBDC an article about equity crowdfunding to give you guys a better sense of it. A couple of videos I think that you should look at for successful campaigns. We're going to find out more about accredited investors and what that means. Maybe a little article about writing a good press release, which I think will also help you craft your story. And then I'm going to send along the brewery one also to make sure that you guys have. So you'll have some homework, some good follow-up stuff. Please go and look at some campaigns. I would definitely go, and I'm sorry I missed your name, but the fella in the room who's running a campaign, go take a look at his campaign, see if it's something that you might be interested in helping out, and he could tell you about his experiences and how it's worked. Every campaign is different, and so I do want to make sure that you take away, the metrics and the rules that I gave you. They're good guidelines, but there's no one-size-fits-all. So don't stick to it if it seems like it's not working. And again, please send me your campaigns when you launch. I'd love to take a look at them. I might give you money. More likely, I'll give you some good advice. But yeah, so please keep engaged with me, and I'll be sure to send some stuff along to you. I think that there's some good brewery stuff, and we'll make sure that gets to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've about wrapped up. One thing I would say, I don't know if I have more email addresses were part of the registration process, so maybe on the sign-in sheet, if you just give me your email address right here, just to print it out there, or if you have a business card or something, that would be wonderful. And I have a couple of business cards here on the side if anyone does have any questions or wants follow-up technical assistance. So. And with that, I think we're good as long as Marty's good.
I am.
Okay. Well, we'll see you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you being here. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks. And you can just, I can take the surveys, or if you want to just make it see.